Okay, before I really get rolling today, I just want to commemorate or pay my respects here to my Aunt Carol, who passed away early this morning. I just heard about it about an hour ago. Apparently, recently she'd been having some health issues, and out of respect for her children, my cousins, and her husband, my uncle, I'm not going to say too much more about this. But I will say that, I lost my dad, her brother, about 6 years ago to bowel cancer that wasn't even detected until it was already in stage 4. He'd gone in for stomach pains, and they found, he needed to have his appendix removed. And but he's one of those people that the appendix is, as I understand it, was on the wrong side. Some people, the appendix is supposed to be sitting to one side of the stomach, and if it's on the other side, that puts it right next to a major artery. So they weren't going to operate. But then the pain came back, and they said, well, we're going to have to remove it. So they went in, and that's when they saw all the spots, And he ended up living about another 4 months after that. Anyway, what I want to say here is I really do believe that he still exists. Same thing with my Aunt Carol. And they're together now. Okay, and I've said before on my on the show here that I am a Christian, but you don't have to be to see this. We really don't know much about the brain. Okay, and go with me here for a minute. The brain is kind of the last frontier of the human body. There's not much we can do to safely examine it while it's still alive. Okay, the person's kind of using it, and that's limiting on scientific inquiry in a major way. But here's something we do know. It's not us. You are not your brain. I know there are a lot of people who will argue with me about this, but everything you can tie to your brain. You can tie you see things that nerve impulses coming from your eyes are interpreted by the brain. In fact, your eyes are actually part of your brain. In fact, your entire nervous system is really part of your brain. It's the same kind of cells. Of all the phenomena and all the stimulus responses that they've been able to trace to the brain, the one thing they have never been able to account for is your consciousness. Okay, and I've talked before about the prefrontal cortex being the seat of self-awareness. That's not where self-awareness occurs. To be more specific, that's where your where your brain processes consequences and ways like what actions one might take. The information is processed in the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, okay? But that's not where your consciousness is located. That feeling you have right now as you listen to my voice, that feeling you have of being you, that feeling inside of, I'm me, I'm in my head here, I'm looking out through my eyes, I'm listening through my ears, etc. There's a me in here. That feeling is your consciousness. Indeed, that feeling is you. That's you. Okay? And they've gone into the brain, every last part of the brain, looking for where that feeling occurs. And there's nobody home. You are not in your brain. You are not your brain. Now, anything more that I could say on that topic would just be speculation. Like maybe your brain is like a radio. That's the way I've always thought of it, is the brain is a radio that is specifically designed to tune into one frequency, and you are that frequency. So you're energy of some kind. Okay. Well, energy is eternal, folks. It changes, it moves around, but it never, ever stops. Now, I feel my dad. I feel that he's watching me. I feel his presence all the time. And people say, well, that's memory, that's this, that's that. You know what? I didn't feel it that much before he died. Okay? I feel my dad's presence more now than I did before he died. Before he died, I had to be in his presence to feel his presence. Physically, I had to be in his physical presence. Now I don't. Now I feel my dad's presence as if he just walked into the room Whenever I'm facing something tough, whenever I'm hurting, whenever I'm happy, and sometimes seemingly for no reason at all. And if you haven't lost a close loved one, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you have, you do. So my point is when you lose somebody close, be sad, okay? Feel your pain. Take your time to hurt. I'm not going to tell you to get over it because you never do. I remember having a conversation with my dad. When I first found out about my health issues, it was years ago, and I remember telling my dad, maybe it's good if I go early, because then it gives everybody a jump on getting over it. Well, my dad just said, but you don't get over it. He said, my dad died 30 years ago, and I'm still not over it. And I've learned since what he meant, because since that time I lost him. And I'm not over it. I'll never be over it, It's my dad, and I love him. And I know I'm going to see him again. Let me correct myself there. I don't know that. I do have faith. But we're not meant to know those things for certain. We're meant to believe. We're meant to have faith. Faith is not knowing. Faith is how you behave in spite of not knowing. Okay, and this is one of the things I hate to bring up my faith again unsolicited. This is one of the things I'm always griping at Christians about when they try to prove God. You're not supposed to. If you knew that God existed beyond the shadow of a doubt, you couldn't have faith. Faith is what you do in spite of not knowing. Okay? So go with me here. All right, and I promise this aside is only going to last the next sentence or two. Closeness with God is what God wants for us. He wants us to be close with Him. Closeness with God requires faith. Faith is what you do when you don't know. So if you could know that God exists while you're still alive, then faith would be impossible, and by extension, so would closeness with God. Now, there's a lot of reasons, I have ideas on why that is. Why is it like this? Why can't we just know? Believe me, I've got speculative answers on all of those things, but I'm not going to go into it right now. If people want to know, I'll tell them. But faith is more powerful than knowledge. Always has been. And at some point, you got to get past seeing faith as something ephemeral and weightless. It's not. Because you're living by faith whether you want to or not. Atheists live by faith. In fact, I think atheists have to have more faith than believers. Okay, it's a pretty big leap of faith to say that all of this grand machinery of material reality that works like such a precision instrument just fell together and came to be for no reason. That it just happened. And I know it's deeper than that. Atheists aren't saying it was for no reason and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to get into the weeds with that, okay? I'm just saying that you have faith that your senses aren't lying to you on a day-to-day basis. How do you know you're really seeing what you're seeing? Or hearing what you're hearing? We've all seen The Matrix, right? I remember, in college, that's one of my majors. I was a philosophy guy. And the first year philosophy, you learn about, in metaphysics, the ed theory, ED, the theory of the evil deceiver, that we're all just some kind of presence in the way to think of it is like you're a brain in a jar and you're being tricked, that none of this is real, and how do you define that? How do you know? You're trusting, you're taking on faith that your senses aren't lying to you, and you're taking on faith that the rules that have governed the universe for as long as you've been alive thus far will continue to be true. You every morning you step out of bed, you're going on faith that matter, that the floor is still going to catch you when you put your foot down, and you're not just going to tumble off into eternity. It's all faith. So there's no reason not to have faith, because you can't not. You're continuing to go on and live would would make you a liar. I love my Aunt Carol, I love my dad, and I know they're together now, and I believe that. I truly have faith in that. Epistemologically, life just doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of, well, everything is energy, and yet one day will end. That's not what energy does, folks. So, again, my point is, when you lose somebody, be sad, but be sad for you. That there's going to be this interruption, this pause in your ability to directly interact with that person. Don't be sad for them. You should be happy. You should rejoice for them. Because they're free. They have moved beyond this confusing, cold, and lonely world. And strapped to a table, tortured, with my dying breath, I will still say, this is not the end. It's not something I only say when someone dies. I really believe this. And anybody out there, if you're hurting, if you lose somebody, Christopher's here for you. Give me a call, give me an email. Okay. Christopher Loree. Loree is my real name. You can find me on Facebook under Christopher Sky-Sunderer. If you need comfort in a dark time, my ear's open, okay? And, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. We'll see you soon, Aunt Carol. And, you take care of my dad, okay? I love you. Welcome to the Sunder the Sky podcast. I am your host, Christopher Sky-Sunderer. This is episode 2. Just to get started here, some thank yous this week. First, I want to thank my friend Brian. Been a really good friend of mine for years now. I don't have a whole lot to say except to say he's always there. And I really appreciate you, Brian. You always seem to be there right when I need you. And yeah, he's got a YouTube channel. You can find it on YouTube under Robert Anderson. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. Be sure to give him a subscribe. I also want to thank Andrea from Facebook, or Andrea, I'm not sure. I've been having problems with allergies. She recommended some great medicinal supplements to help me with that. Allergies this time of year, it's always bad for me. I'm allergic to pollen, ragweed, and dust mold. Those are the environmental allergies that I have. And it's a real pain in the ass when you're trying to record a podcast and your voice just keeps carrying this raspy crackliness in the back of it because you can't shake this nasal and post-nasal congestion to save your life. I've been trying some different things, and I can say that a few of Andrea's recommendations have definitely made a difference, so thanks for that, Andrea. Also want to thank Phoebe from Facebook. Always been a great friend. She actually gave me the idea a couple days ago. I released the Okay is Okay, Okay video on the Thunderclaps section. That's an exclusive for members of the Facebook group. She actually gave me that idea over a year ago when the OK hand gesture as a racial symbol or a white supremacy symbol first got rolling and as a media, I don't know, theory. But I didn't get the video put together at the time because, when that came up, when she had said that to me, I thought that was winding down. I thought that they were getting ready to move on from that in the media, and the news cycle just keeps accelerating, and I thought we were at the tail end of that particular bit of ridiculousness, so I never bothered to put a video together, and indeed it did go away, but it just recently came back in the last couple weeks apparently, so the iron was reheated, so to speak. So went ahead and did it. Be sure to check that out. Join the Facebook group Sunder the Sky podcast, and yeah, it's pretty funny. But thanks, Phoebe. You've much like Brian, you're always there right when I need you. Okay, I wanted to mention something. I don't have a whole lot of stuff for today, a whole lot of a show for today. Whenever somebody close to me passes, it sends me into kind of a tailspin. I don't know that, it's not like, not part of the sadness and the grief and all that, but there's something that happens in addition to all of that. I really start thinking about life, especially with an untimely death like this. It's like, man, you can go at any moment. And we walk around every day thinking about, like, we take everything for granted so much, but you really, your time could be up at the drop of a hat. Just, you're gone, and gets you thinking about, what's this all about? Why are we here? Why are we given all this precious gift of life with the dubious gift of knowing that it's going to end? I honestly think, because I think about all the things that I want to do and see and experience, and I'm like, in the face of one day having to kiss it all goodbye, none of it really seems to matter so much. The only thing that still matters to me are the people around me and the people I care about. And I think maybe, I'm not going to go into too much of a digression here, but I really think maybe what makes happiness possible is taking the focus off of your own happiness. Focusing on helping others be happy. For nothing, not expecting anything in return. Just help people when you can, and make sure that your loved ones know that they're loved, and help them do what they got to do, and don't think about yourself so much. You got to take care of yourself. That's the bare minimum, but try to focus as much as you can, on helping the people you love. Yeah, we'll talk more about that another time. I just wanted to put that bee in your bonnet. When you're sad, when you're down, when you're in depressed times, and I deal with that. I have depressive episodes. It's been floated to me that I may suffer from bipolar depression. I certainly suffer from depression. I can't get two psychologists or psychiatrists to agree on whether I actually suffer from bipolar depression or bipolar 2. But I do have episodes where I drop so far down into this pit of just total sadness and hopelessness and seemingly out of nowhere. It just happens. And when I'm down there, it's like you feel like you're never going to be happy again. But let's be real, it's a very selfish thing. When that happens, it draws me into myself and twists me around so all I can see is myself. Every single time, the way out of it is to think about other people. Really shift focus to the happiness of others. It saves me every time. And maybe taking the focus off of our own happiness is what makes happiness possible. And when you're focused on your own happiness, you're cruising. You're not hitting the gas. You're just letting yourself coast. Okay? But if you want to hit the accelerator on happiness, you focus on someone else. I don't know. We'll get into that more another time. But I want to also mention here, for a few months now, I've been working on a series of articles on the blog, which you can find at sunderthesky.com. Sunder the Sky is all one word. I'm sure you've seen online, there are a lot of places you can go, and it's usually at places like Neon Nettle and Your Newswire, and places like, they're kind of conspiracy theory-ish, where they'll list the Clinton death list, right? All the people who may have been killed by the Clinton machine, right? Well, I decided this past summer I wanted to go through and I wanted to really scrub all those lists. I wanted to compile a big master list and, of all those names, and I wanted to really scrub. I wanted to vet each of those cases. And when I say vet, my vetting process, I'm not trying to prove guilt. What I just wanted to do was just go through and bounce any names and cases where it's just like, just because someone who knew the Clintons died doesn't mean it had anything to do with them. That's what I did, and I tried to go by two criteria. Each case had to match one or both. The first was people who were directly associated with the Clintons and knew things the Clintons might not like getting out. Or two, the other criteria is if they weren't directly tied to the Clintons and were tied through some intermediary of some kind, then it had to be a case where law enforcement officials really suspected that it may have been because of their ties to the Clintons that they died, okay? And I started with 140 names on my big master list. Went through the first 70 and I whittled it down to whatever part 1 of the article was, which I think was 38 names. And then I kept going, and for part 2, I scrubbed through another 20 on the master list and came up with about 10. This is an ongoing procedure, okay? This project is ongoing. And as I have continued, my master list has grown. Okay, so what I'm starting with, that list has gotten bigger. It's now up to, if I include from the very beginning, not including all the names I've bounced, the master list would be 400 names now. So I still have a long way to go, and I'm going to keep going, and every time I hit about 20 names I'm going to that I've arrived on as being substantive, meeting those criteria I mentioned, I'm going to post another part to the article. And I bring it up here today because part 3 is almost set, and I'm planning on having that posted next week, probably the day before or the same day that next week's episode of the podcast drops. So look for that, and I'll post a link in the description box to all of that. Okay, I want to pose something to you guys, and I just want you to keep this in mind because we're going to come back to it at the end of the podcast today. Okay, this won't seem to be apropos of anything right now, but again, we're going to come back to it. Everybody knows who Jimmy Hoffa was, right? Jimmy Hoffa was a recruiter for the Teamsters Union. He was mobbed up, okay, and he eventually became president of the Teamsters. Now, nothing I'm saying here is a particular commentary on unions. I am of a completely 50-50 mixed opinion on unions. I think unions have done a lot of good, and I think they've done a lot of harm. Okay, for as much as unions will try to recruit people by pointing out how much the CEOs that they work for make, like, hey, you work at that company, those CEOs make 10,000 times your salary and do practically nothing and all that. Yeah, those union leaders should reveal how much they make for essentially just organizing the laborers. Okay, it's obscene. I believe unions are a good idea, and this is all an aside. This isn't supposed to be about unions. I just want to point this out. I am an anarcho-capitalist. Okay, I think unions are a great idea. I just think unions should be private. There's no reason for unions to have any kind of government involvement. Let's say you work for Widget Co. making widgets, and Widget Co. is this huge corporation. Okay, and you don't like the working conditions, and you don't want to start complaining because you get fired. All right, so you're thinking about unionizing. There is nothing wrong with doing that. You get all your workers together, you get them to decide to go in on a union, and instead of looking for some kind of permission slip from the idiots in Washington who don't have any idea about any of this stuff, they don't know business, they sure as hell don't know hard work. All right, don't let them convince you that they can relate to your plight in your blue-collar job. Bernie Sanders didn't have a straight job until he was in his 40s. Okay, he was kicked out of a hippie commune for laziness. Just process that. So you get your workforce together, and you know what? You go down to the local credit union or the local bank, and you get all, 10,000 employees to co-sign on a loan and make an offer on the company. Believe it, or at least controlling interest in the company. And you believe me, that's going to get the attention. There's your bargaining leverage. We're going to buy a controlling stake in this company, or at least enough representation to have a voice on the board. And then you start negotiating. Do you want us to do this? Or would you rather start listening to us about these working conditions? And there's your union. And people say, oh, there's a lot more to it than that. No, there isn't. There's a lot more to it than that as soon as the government comes in and says, well, here's what we got to do. We need to get this and this and this for you, and we need you to have this kind of, legal charter with the government. We need to recognize you as an official union. This is just like the government taxing anything else. They come in and they act like, oh, I'm an essential part of this now. Why? Because I'm the government. What does that do? So anyway, back to Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was, like all men, deeply flawed. I believe he sincerely cared about the plight of the working man. I really do. Okay, he came from that world. He was a truck driver. He busted his guts and worked and worked and worked I'm certain he didn't only join with the Teamsters to become a recruiter for money. I think he believed in what he was doing. And when you say, well, why did he get involved with the mafia and all that? You know what? Who knows? The thing is, if you're in a union, a public union, you're dealing with the government anyway. The government is nothing but a big mafia. You know what the only difference between the government and the mob is? The mob is somewhat competent.
All right. Give you a hand? Yeah.
Man ain't afraid to get his hands dirty.
I ain't afraid to get them dirty, and I ain't afraid to get them bloody, baby. I ain't afraid of a fucking thing. I'm gonna tell you why. Because I'm a member of a brotherhood. Jimmy Hoffa, local 299 International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Now go around and get a big stone or something. Chalk up this back.
Want some help?
$10 each new member. 10% of the first year's dues.
That's what you make?
What I make is none of your fucking business. That's what I'm gonna pay you. You come in with me. I want to tell you something.
Well, listen, any man ain't afraid to get his hands dirty. Man I ever seen go out of his way to help a trucker change a tire.
Someday this man's gonna be president of the United States.
Fuck that. Someday I'm gonna be president of the Teamsters. And I want you to listen. When this Tin Lizzie breaks down...
The reason I bring this up is, would you believe me if I told you... Let me pull a Morpheus. What if I told you that at one point Jimmy Hoffa was the most powerful man on Earth? Would you believe me? Because I am telling you that, and it is true. At one point, Jimmy Hoffa was the most powerful man on the planet. Arguably the most powerful man that had ever lived. And that's not hyperbole. Yes, even more powerful than the President of the United States. And I'll tell you why, and explain what this has to do with anything at the end of the show today. Okay? Okay, so what's going on in the world? Elizabeth Warren. Okay. So there's a lot. She's really, according to some polls, she's pulled ahead of Joe Biden. Honestly, at this point, it's silly to really try to call this. We've still got a good 5, maybe 6 months before they're actually going to tap somebody for the nomination. But lately, because she's pulling ahead in the polls, she's been spewing a lot of nonsense. She's talking about taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgery for transgendered persons. But the thing that has come up in the news cycle here in the last week is that she was speaking recently to a group of leftists, and she said that she was once fired from a teaching job because she was pregnant. Or she said that you didn't get invited back if you were pregnant, and that her boss, her supervisor at the time, walked in and noticed she was pregnant because she was quite visibly pregnant, she says, and she could tell all he saw was a pregnant lady, and she wasn't asked to come back. Okay? Well, we've also got video evidence that from a speech given in not a speech, but an interview that she gave in 2007, which seems like ancient history now. She was talking about that very speaking job and said it was her decision not to go back because she was pregnant. Okay, so here we go. Here I'm gonna show you first what she said recently, and then we'll transition to what she said in 2007. Make up your own mind
about this. Teaching special needs kids is a calling, but I finished the first year visibly pregnant, and back in those days, it meant you didn't get invited back. That's how it was.
For what? I mean, you actually pursued that career.
I actually did. I was married at 19 and then graduated from college, actually, after I'd married. And my first year post graduation, I worked, it was in a public school system, but I worked with the children with disabilities. And I did that for a year. And then that summer, I actually didn't have the education courses, so I was on an emergency certificate, it was called. And I went back to graduate school and took a couple of courses in education and said, I don't think this is going to work out for me. and I was pregnant with my first baby. So I had a baby and stayed home for a couple of years. And I was really casting about, thinking, what am I going to do? And my husband's view of it was, stay home. You know, we have children, we'll have more children. You'll love this. And I was very restless about it.
Okay, so there it is. You know, very, very clearly seems to be lying here. Now, I know that it might be shocking that a woman with no discernibly human behavioral patterns or mannerisms, who is a proven pathological liar, having misrepresented herself to be of Native American breeding for over 40 years, profiting in the millions by said misrepresentation, I know it might be shocking to consider this person might be lying about something that happened in her past, but that is indeed what's happened here. That's my read on it. You know, and I don't know how anybody... I want you guys to appreciate for a second what Uncle Thunder here did for you, okay? Because to get those clips, I had to weed through just about 2 hours of Elizabeth Warren footage. So I had to subject my ears, my eyes, and my brain to 2 hours of, well, here I am, and I'm talking about this, and I wanted to get into teaching, and I'm just the fakest. She is like a mannequin from hell. All right? Like those god-awful videos she did where she's in her kitchen just getting folksy with the people. Well, here I am in the kitchen room of the house I own. This seems to be some kind of surface here. What's it called? She asks somebody off camera. Oh, this is the island. Oh, it's sort of a kind of a counter thingy that just floats off by itself in the middle of the room. Well, I'm so glad you could all join me today, and now I'm going to have myself one beer. A beer. Glug, glug, yummy. There, I set it down, I cross my arms and lean in so as to get real with you hip kids. Oh my, that's quite a different taste in the mouth, isn't it? I mean, I have beer all the time. Well, perhaps there was something different or wrong with this particular bottle. Notably stifling a gag. Oh, and who's this that's come into the kitchen room? Why, hello, husband. Would you like to speak with these nice people who have come to see us today? Perhaps I could make you one sandwich. Perhaps a PB and J. I mean, how does anybody not cringe their skin off whenever this woman attempts to come across as relatable or even human? But I mention all of this, and I mention this most recent lie, and because you know you're going to see Biden, you're going to see all these Buttigieg and people who still think they have a prayer in hell getting the nomination, tagging her on this, just going in for those jabs about her lying about this. And if it's anything like what they did to Kamala, it's going to be brutal. But I just want you to prepare yourself, because it might end up being Warren who gets tapped to run against Trump. And be prepared, because it's coming. Whomever the Dems select as their candidate, take your Dramamine, because once that's decided, the spin will begin. And suddenly people who've been slamming the hell out of her, or whoever it is, attacking Biden, whoever it's going to be, are suddenly going to shift to the other foot and, oh, I love this person. They're the greatest choice we could have made. You want an example? Here you go. Here's Chris Matthews in 2008, before the media had decided Obama was their guy.
You're a big Barack supporter, right, Senator?
I am. Yes, I am.
Well, name some of his legislative accomplishments. Senator, I want you to name some of Barack Obama's legislative accomplishments tonight, if you can.
Well, what I will talk about is more about what he's offering to the American people.
What has he accomplished, sir? You say you support him. Sir, you have to give me his accomplishments. You've supported him for president. You're on national television.
Well,
name his legislative accomplishments, Barack Obama, sir.
Well, I'm not going to be able to name you specific
Can you name any
items of legislative accomplishment.
Can you name anything he's accomplished as a congressman?
No, I'm not going to be able to do that tonight. Well, I will tell you what.
Well, that's a problem, isn't it?
I'm not going to be able to do that tonight.
Well, that's a problem, isn't it?
Well, I, I, Well, no, I don't think it is, because I think one of the things that Senator Obama does is he inspires.
Not even the person that's here to speak on behalf of Barack Obama can list his legislative accomplishments. I've worked with Senator Clinton in and around the issue.
But let's talk about.
I want to stop and allow you to have the opportunity to list the accomplishments, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. One of the things that she does, for example, on health care, she offers that and indicates that she's offering a solution.
No, we're not talking about her accomplishments. You're supposed to be talking about it.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut this off because I've been told to, but Senator, I'm going to give you one more shot. List Barack Obama's accomplishments as a U.S. Senator now.
Well, what I'll do is I will say this to you. He will offer the ability for the United States to be a leader in the world again. He will put health care back on the front burner.
Thank you very much, U.S. Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones, and State Senator from Texas, Kirk Watson.
And here's Chris Matthews after the media had decided Obama was their guy.
Always speak before Barack Obama, not after Barack Obama.
I have to tell you, it's part of reporting this case, this election. The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech. I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, I don't have that too often.
Steady.
No, seriously. It's a dramatic event. He speaks about America in a way that has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the feeling we have about our country. And that is an objective assessment.
Yeah, you know what I love about Chris Matt? He's just like all these other idiot leftist pundits. He talks without thinking. And between brain and mouth, there's nothing, right? I mean, the brain doesn't even get involved. The mouth just goes. Obama just talks about how we feel about our country, and that's objective. What? No, jackass. That's kind of the exact opposite of objective. This is one of the main problems I have with the left. Matthews embodies it. He always has. They just talk and and their platform is then their credibility. Not only their own credibility, but the credibility of whatever nonsense comes burbling out of their half-drunken lips. Obama feelings is objective, right? Like, my God, take your meds, Matthews. And there, he's sitting there with with Keith Olbermann. I mean, one of my commitments to you listeners here, okay, this podcast, Sunder the Sky, each episode will be precisely as long as it needs to be. No more, no less. Whether that's 10 minutes or 3 hours. It depends on what I'm talking about and what I need to say to convey my point. I'm never going to say, okay, I have to fill X amount of time for this episode because that's how you get crap like Chris Matthews' hardball nonsense, or literally any string of syllables that trumpets from the lips of legendary whirlwind of pompous jackassery Keith Olbermann, the proudest and most puff-chested flip-flop who-cares bullshit merchant that has ever darkened the door of a studio. But flippity-flop they will just as soon as one of these clowns gets the party nod. And let's be real, the Democratic voter, and I know a lot of you are out there, and though we may not see eye to eye on a lot of things, I know there are reasonable people out there who've been Democrats their entire lives and have for the last few years really started to see the cracks in their movement. Okay, that's what hashtag walk away is about. You really shouldn't expect this party to field a decent candidate for you. They haven't done so since Kennedy. When Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass the bill so you can find out what's in it. Hey. When that person becomes the most grounded and reasonable member of a party, you may be assured that said party has gone completely insane. I'm not a Republican. I'm a constitutional conservative. But that means I'm conservative about the Constitution. I think the Constitution should be preserved, held on to. But I'm not a member of any party. I don't trust any of them. So please don't see me as some kind of a polar opposition to you if you're a Democrat. I want the best for you too. We probably just disagree on how that might be acquired. So, it could be Warren, it could be Biden. I don't know, it could be someone else. It's looking like it's going to be Warren or Biden. I really doubt Sanders is going to get back into this thing. I don't think he should. I mean, even for his own health. Let's say he does. So let's say that's the triumvirate from hell that we're looking at. You're either going to have Biden, Warren, or Sanders. So you can choose pedophilia stan, the happy hunting ground, or the United States of Venezuela. I mean, you're going to have one of these people. It's just a matter of who do we get to watch Trump beat the shit out of in 2020. I don't know. I don't know who I would rather see, because I would like to see all three of those people get their asses handed to them in an election. I really would. And I feel like whoever it is, they're just getting fed into the mother of all buzzsaws. This country is furious at the Democrats right now. In spite of what they're trying to make you believe is happening on CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and HuffPo and all the other propaganda rags out there. Who knows? Before I get to my final point here, like I said, it's not a hell of a lot of show today. But I am going to do a transcript reading. This is going to be a thunderclap. I'm going to read the transcript of the phone call. President of the United States, Donald Trump, to the President of Ukraine. Because that utter piece of shit, Adam Schiff, has... I mean, everyone's aware now of how he just basically stood up and pretended to read the transcript, never dreaming the Trump administration would release it to the public, which is exactly what they did. And he lied about what was on it. And then later, when he was called on it, he said, "Oh, I thought it was clear I was doing a parody." Come on, man. Look at the guy reading it. Look at Adam Schiff when he reads that thing. He keeps looking down at it like he wants to make sure he's getting it right. Okay, it's just I'm not going to get into this today because I got a lot to say about this, but I just wanted to let everybody know I am going to do a short video that's just going to be a reading of the actual transcript. It's not very long. I mean, that phone conversation was, I don't know, 5-6 minutes. And I'll even put a link to this in the description box here to the full transcript where it's posted. You know what? I'll link to where it's posted on CNN. All right, just to salt the wound a little bit. Okay, my final point. Ever since Adam Schiff did what he did and all this, you know, when Nancy Pelosi decided to go hard into the paint on impeachment, something's coming. The Democratic Party has completely abdicated its duty in Congress and the Senate. They don't govern, they don't legislate anymore. All they've been doing since the night, November 8th, 2016, when the election was finally called for Trump, the only thing the Democratic Party has been doing is trying to get him out of office. It's been one thing after another. I'm not going to go through the whole litany of it. You all know what I'm talking about. You know, all these hoaxes, all these, you know, oh, well, you know, okay, maybe he's crazy. Maybe, you know, we should be thinking about his fitness for office. And, oh, well, maybe he got peed on by Russian prostitutes and all that. And it's just one thing after another after another. Now they've really pushed it because even the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, decided to back impeachment. Well, Trump ain't playing around no more. He is now actively looking into treason charges for those involved in pushing these hoaxes. So far, the only one he's said aloud is Adam Schiff. I know he's looking to charge Stretch Pelosi with treason, and Schumer, and I mean, you just know it. Practically that entire party, at least that party's leadership, and its media darlings, like the Squad, are potentially going to be accused here and charged. I want to tell you that whenever the Democratic Party leadership finds itself in the hot seat or in trouble, public tragedies seem to just happen. They seem to just materialize out of nowhere. Okay, mass shootings, terrorist attacks. This is a party that, for its entire history, has used violence to get its way. They founded the KKK to harass people. The message of the KKK might surprise you. The thing they had on all their posters and slogans was vote or die. Now, why might that surprise you? Well, you've heard that in the recent history, the recent past, I'll say. Puff Daddy had this whole vote or die campaign. Remember that? Yeah, that was the KKK. Okay, they came up with that. And what they would do is they would go out into the countryside and black people in those days universally voted Republican. And the KKK actually lynched more white people than it did black people. They weren't lynching them over their race. They were lynching them over their support of blacks and not voting for Democrats. Again, I'll say, look, you got to watch some Dinesh D'Souza documentaries. He talks about this extensively. First movie ever screened in the White House was Birth of a Nation, for God's sake. It was all pursuant to this democratic agenda of, in order to hold on to power, we need a demon to fight. We're going to demonize the people who look the most different. And at that time, that was blacks. Okay? They're the easiest to reckon. You see them walking in the street, and you just, what if everybody had a little icon floating over their head telling you what their party affiliation was? You know, then it would be so easy for politicians to just, hey, he's one of the ones you should be hating right now. Hate anyone with the D floating over their head, or hate anyone with the R floating over their head, or the L, or the G, or whatever, right? Well, these blacks were, I mean, you could just look at them and see, oh, that's a Republican, okay? And it's not like the Democratic Party is a stranger to using violence to get its way. And I'm just saying that it wouldn't be a bad idea. It's never a bad idea, but now especially, just make sure you're prepared for, if you have to go a little while without commerce, okay, make sure you've got food, water, some way to protect yourself and your family, okay, learn how to use guns, get a gun, keep it loaded, keep it on you. Foster a sense of community. Get to know your neighbors, okay? Know your neighbors. Learn some useful skills. Learn how to build a fire. You know, learn basic first aid. Learn CPR. Okay, the updated stuff. Because CPR has changed a lot. Just since I remember when I first learned CPR, you know, they were still teaching the, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. You know they don't even teach that anymore because it doesn't do anything? Yeah, that was part of CPR for 30 years. And it does nothing. Okay, you want to clear the airway, but then it's essentially the chest pumping. It's making sure looking for signs of hypothermia, things like that. Learn that stuff. Most of the stuff you can learn on YouTube. Okay, it's not like I'm asking you to enroll in courses everywhere. Just learn how to do stuff. Here's something nobody thinks about. Okay, for their shit hits the fan loadout, their kit. Medicine. Everybody needs to have a little stockpile of antibiotics. Some simple pain relief, even if it's just Tylenol, ibuprofen or acetaminophen. What if you're diabetic? What if you need insulin and you can't get it? Man, are you in trouble. Okay, so make sure, and I don't know particularly how to do this part. I'm going to talk to my doctor, and I'm going to see, and I'll talk about it on the show next time. What do you do to stock up on medicine you might need? Doctors aren't in the habit of writing you more than what you need. But the reason, this is where I'll come back to Jimmy Hoffa. Yep. Jimmy Hoffa was the most powerful man in the world at one time. So powerful, he basically just had the President of the United States wrapped around his finger. Okay? His little finger. He was in, I believe, 1971, and somebody fact check me on this. All this information's available everywhere. I believe it was in 71 he was convicted of fraud and some things having to do with the Teamsters Union pension fund. Okay, he ended up getting sent to jail for almost a decade. I think his sentence was for 10 years, and then he got charged again at some point. Within a couple of years. I think it was 3 years into his sentence. Or no, he was convicted in the late 60s, but it was 3 years into his serving out his sentence. He got convicted of some other things, and they added another 5 years onto his sentence to run consecutively. And then it was actually what happened in 71 is Nixon let him out. Why? I'm going to tell you right now, the reason Nixon granted Hoffa clemency with time served, is what the ruling was, is because Hoffa told him to. Hoffa, when he went inside, appointed a man named Fitzsimmons, who was a longtime friend of Hoffa's. He was actually considered one of Hoffa's disciples. He was somebody who really looked up to Hoffa, who Hoffa had kind of taken under his wing and brought along. He became president of the Teamsters, acting president of the Teamsters, while Hoffa was in prison. Okay? So not officially president, but acting president. Now, Fitzsimmons, or Fitz, as he was known, corresponded with Hoffa in prison. He also called Hoffa frequently and even visited him in person. And, I mean, connect the dots. What does that mean? It means Hoffa was still running the Teamsters. He was doing it through Fitz. Okay, now, back in the 30s, Teamsters Union I think it was Minnesota, had a trucker strike. You see where I'm going yet? Trucker strike basically shut down half the country. That was when Hoffa was just a union rep, high ranking, but not the president. When Hoffa went into prison, he was president of the Teamsters. The reason Nixon obeyed when Hoffa called him and said, "Let me out," is because he threatened a nationwide trucker strike. I want you people listening to this to take a minute and consider what would happen if trucking stopped. Just trucking. That's one thing. I am here to tell you that even now, certainly back in the early 70s, when Nixon let Hoffa out of prison, even now, if trucks stopped rolling on the roads, this entire country would grind to a halt. We would go from where we are right now to the dark ages in less than a week. Every single thing that you shop at the store, the doctors get their supplies. Anything you have to do relies on trucks being on the road. We're not at this vision of the future with drones delivering everything yet. Okay? And that's just trucking. I want you to consider what happens if the power goes out. Well, the power goes out, eventually we lose trucking too. Okay, my point is, it doesn't have to be the next civil war. It doesn't have to be the end times. It doesn't have to be a planet killer meteor to put us in a situation where you're going to need your go bag, where you're going to need your canned foods, your bottled water, and your stockpile of medicine. It doesn't have to be the biblical tribulation for you to need that shotgun on the mantle. All it takes is for one major utility to go down. So don't roll your eyes when people say something's coming and you should be prepared. Right? Because that doesn't necessarily mean some huge civil war. It just means a basic utility going down. All right, my hometown, as I've said, was Randolph, Ohio. Everything ran off of electricity and oil. Okay, we had our water pump because we had well water. The water pump was electric. So when we lost power, we also lost water. Now, I want you to think about that. There was one summer, a bad storm knocked the power out for a week and a half. Did I mention we had horses? How do you get water to your cattle? We had horses. It was a horse ranch. We had, at our height, I think we had 18 horses. There were cattle ranches that had hundreds of cows, all right, or sheep, or goats, thousands of chickens. Okay, and so when we lost power, everybody held their breath because we were always prioritized last by Ohio Edison and First Energy for getting our power restored because we're the country. Who cares? That's not where the hospitals are. That's not, and I understand their point. It's just people in the city lose power; they don't lose water. You know what I mean? So I want you to think about it. You could be, if just one basic utility goes down nationwide, you could lose water and power and garbage collection, all right, and heat. We got winter coming up, so be prepared. Okay, take this seriously. You do not have to be a doomsday prepper to just be prepared for having to be off the grid for a while. Okay, because everybody, my friends over there at the Inconclusive Breakdown, they talk about this all the time, and I hear it said elsewhere as well, and it's something people really need to take seriously. Okay, it doesn't take much. You spend an extra $50 to $100 on a grocery shopping run, okay, and just stock up on canned food and bottled water. Make sure you've got a gun, make sure you got bullets, and make sure you've got medicine. Okay, again, get to know your neighbors. Make sure everybody in the community knows that you're not enemies. Stop avoiding eye contact when you go out to check the mail. Okay, talk to your neighbors. Learn some useful skills. It'll cost you an hour of your time on YouTube to learn how to build a fire, how to dress a wound, how to treat someone who's in shock or who's cold. Or just do it. Okay, because by the time when something happens and you need the stuff, you're not going to have access to learn how. You got to do that part now. Okay, and that's all I've got for today. Everybody stay safe out there. Look out for each other, and remember, when I slam the left, I'm talking about politicians. Okay, unless otherwise stated, and sometimes I slam social justice warriors and everything like that. I want you guys to remember, most Democrats are reasonable people. We have all been subjected to, we all started our lives with 13 years of government indoctrination, and we're all propagandized to by the left every single day. Okay? Just because you differ with someone's political opinions does not make them the enemy. Strike the root, not the branches. All right, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
I'm an Indian too.